This is the Lincoln Journal Star editorial board interview with James Michael Bowers, who's running for the 46th district in the Nebraska legislature. James Michael, thank you for being with us today. Before we turn it over to you and ask a bunch of questions and get you talking, we'll have Kent Walgamot talk just for a tiny bit about himself. Can you introduce yourself, Kent?
Yeah, hi, James. Welcome back, I guess. I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment, and I've been on the editorial board for 12 years.
All right. Well, we will get started. You're on the city council, but you've probably obviously been watching elements at the legislature. At times, it has not looked like a fun place this session. So, why do you want to be a state senator, and then what experiences and attributes qualify you for it?
Well, thank you so much for that question. My name is James Michael Bowers. I'm on the Lincoln City Council, and I'm running for the Nebraska legislature in District 46. I'm running because as a social worker and a small business owner, I'm on the front lines every single day. I work with families who are experiencing problems and struggles that have been caused by our community and through state inaction. I want to bring my experience as a social worker and as a therapist and as a small business owner into the policy-making process. I have a solid track record through my time on the city council, and I have a solid track record of things that I've been able to accomplish in the community to make our city an even better place to live. I know that going to the legislature will be difficult at times, but there is a great opportunity to do some really good things for our state and to stand up for working families, to stand up for folks in District 46, and to stand up for children and families.
All right. Next question for you. There are issues with public education, with public health, places where local control and state control sort of have had some tension. In the legislature, where would what would you be inclined to do? Are you more interested in more local control? Should the state be more involved in some of these issues than they have been, say, the Lincoln-Lancaster Health Department issue? What are your thoughts on local control?
I lean more towards local control. And I think that's really evident through the directed health measures the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department took to keep our city safe and our county safe when we were going through the pandemic of COVID. I was disappointed to see that some folks on a state level were looking to take away our health director's professional experience and competency and skills on when to apply directed health measures. Without having those tools in place, I believe that process would have been more politicized, and it would have taken longer to do the right thing. And so I trust the folks that are at the heads of these departments that have the local relationships that are from the community, that live in the community, and that already have those relationships built. And I trust people like our health director. And so I would lean more towards local control for a lot of these policy decisions.
All right. The next question. What are your priorities? What would be your solutions to the corrections crisis our state faces?
Well, as we know, our prison is one of the most overcrowded in the nation. We need to continue to look at parole and how do we expand that, and how do we make that more available for more folks. We also need to look at why we are putting people in the correction system for. Are we putting them in there because they're a true danger to society, or are we putting them in there because we might disagree with choices that they've made, but not causing any harm to our society? And we've also seen success with things like drug courts through Lancaster County, and I think that we need to look at expanding that. So I think that some of our solutions for the overcrowding in prison is looking at why we're putting people in prison or the correctional system in general. What are we doing when they get out? And are we making sure that folks have the resources they need and the tools they need to help prevent recidivism? And while they go through that process, making sure that we have things like drug courts available and other specialty courts to make sure that people can have tailored solutions for issues that they're facing. And that our correction system does not become the mental health provider for folks in our state.
All right. You're very efficient answering these questions. So if you feel like you have a little bit more to say, you're welcome to. There's no law that says you have to fill the 30 minutes, but and we'll have a chance for you to come back and sort of elaborate on anything you want at the end. But tax reform, what should tax reform look like in Nebraska? And if it involves tax cuts, which everybody seems to be interested in, where's the money come from in your mind?
Right. I think that we need to look at how do we provide targeted tax relief to people in Nebraska. The highest tax bracket right now is about $50,000 for income. And I think we need to have some honest conversations about what does tax reform look like and how do we provide true tax relief to everyday folks in Nebraska, and not just clumping people that make $50,000 with folks that may be making $500,000 or $1 million. And so I think we need to have some honest conversations about what that looks like and who does our tax reforms actually benefit, and making sure that we provide those to the middle class and folks that in Nebraska that would benefit the most from these tax relief measures that could be implemented.
All right. Question about the election and election reform. Do you believe efforts to investigate the 2020 election in Nebraska are warranted? Do you support efforts to change the state's election law and procedures? And if so, how can those changes be made without disenfranchising voters?
I don't think that the investigation into the 2020 election is warranted. I think, a lot of those claims that are being made are baseless and are not grounded in reality. I think it's fine for folks to have questions, but at some point, at what point does it become a baseless allegation and a pseudo conspiracy theory? And so I don't think that the investigation is warranted, and the calls to do, there's calls for a recount that are continuing to this day, a year and a half later. So I don't think that that's appropriate. I don't believe in voter ID, and I don't think that we need to make our elections and the ability to vote more restrictive. Recently, when the city and county had some drop boxes at local libraries, I thought that was a good way to make sure that folks had access to dropping off their ballots and to make sure that elections are more accessible for everyone.
All right. Should the legislature scrap nonpartisanship? And if not, what would you do to improve nonpartisanship in the legislature?
The Nebraska legislature should remain nonpartisan. People expect their elected officials to fight for people and not a political party. The Nebraska legislature has had success remaining nonpartisan, and making our legislature partisan where things are decided along party lines would not be beneficial for everyday people in Nebraska. What we need to continue to do is to make sure that we continue to build trusting relationships with other legislators in Nebraska in order to build trusting relationships in order to increase nonpartisanship. On the city council, I've had a lot of success in building relationships with people across the aisle in all political parties in order to find common ground and in order to make policies that work for folks in Lincoln. And so the way that we do that is by willing to be honest up front. I believe in consistent expectations up front, which is something that I learned through being a middle school social worker, is that if you can tell people up front where you're at and what direction you're going, that earns other people's respect. That earns other people's trust, because you're sticking to your word and you're letting people know with no surprises. And I don't believe in having surprises pop up I don't believe in having surprises pop up. I think it creates ruins some of that trusting relationship, and I think it creates the instability. I also think that we need to treat each other with respect. There's definitely going to be folks in Nebraska that have different views than I have, but at the end of the day, we're all Nebraskans. And one thing that I've always believed in my campaigns and through being in political office is that people who run for office are wanting to make Nebraska or their communities a better place. And if we can start from that and start from that agreement that we all want to have a better outcome for Nebraska, I think that takes a lot of the edge off in the increasing partisanship that we're seeing today.
All right, Kent, I'm down to my last question. So this is when Kent jumps in and asks his pet questions. So
Yeah.
you're on.
As you probably know, most of the real work at the legislature gets done in committee. Have you given some thoughts as to what committees you'd like to try to get on if you're elected?
Yes. Spending the most of my career in a school, in our public schools in Lincoln, I would definitely try to seek a seat on the education committee. I would also be interested in serving on health and human services, or business and labor, or even government and military. I think that there's a lot of unique ways to learn about our state, and there's a lot of issues where I could hit the ground running on. And so education would definitely be a priority, followed by health and human services, or business and labor, or government and military.
And I'm also interested in your views on the two big water projects that are under consideration, the canal to move the South Platte water into Nebraska and the big lake.
You know, I'm not completely opposed, but I do have concerns that need to be addressed. I'm concerned about the canal project and the legal battle that could come out of Colorado from who has right to that water. And I'm worried about how that'll affect our neighbors. I'm also worried about the funding that would be spent into creating the lake that you had just mentioned. And should those dollars be put towards something that would help people directly in recovering from the pandemic? I'm not completely opposed to it, but I do think that we need to have further study on both of these projects to determine what's the feasibility, how much is it going to cost, what is going to be the direct impact for Nebraskans, or is that funding that would go towards these projects be better used towards other things like housing assistance, rent assistance, helping people make basic needs, or funding programs that would help Nebraskans get a leg up and recover from the pandemic.
All right, so Kent, there's still time. You want to ask any more questions, or are you good?
I'm good, I think.
All right. So James Michael, we're at the last question, and this is sort of a chance for you to have a big finish. What did we not ask you that you would have liked us to ask you? Priorities, anything like that?
Absolutely. Do you want to share a story first and then kind of go into a little bit of a tangent from that story? The reason why I got involved in politics, thanks. The reason I got involved into politics was when our state tried to privatize child welfare. I was working on the front lines of our child welfare system, and these agencies were going bankrupt essentially overnight. And that was hurting our community. And I remember becoming so upset and frustrated and feeling like we were failing not only our children and families, but failing those that were supporting these children and families. And it was when we went to the Capitol to try to raise awareness about this that something clicked in my mind. Instead of becoming angry at the system, instead of being angry at the people that run the system, why don't we become one of the people who make the system? We have the ability to solve these problems in our cities and in our state. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is by stepping up and leading. And so for every problem that people in Nebraska faces, there's a solution to that problem. It's about how do we figure out what the priorities are going to be and how do we get to that finish line with common ground. During my time on the city council, I've had a lot of success in finding that common ground in establishing priorities for our city. While on the city council, I was able to protect our libraries from being losing funding and losing their availability to remain open during a budget crunch. I was able to implement some policies to attract and retain young professionals like myself who are leaving the state by allowing businesses to create sidewalk cafes, which would lead to vibrancy in communities. I've also led on issues that impact some of our Nebraskan citizens that are sometimes left out. And that was when I led the ban on conversion therapy. I've also implemented some measures to help businesses where we cut some red tape to allow pawn shops to be open on Sundays, because prior to that they were banned. And then also allowing restaurants and establishments that have Keno allow folks to play Keno in their establishments and not have to leave their place of employment when they're off the clock. Essentially allowing people to have more control over their business. So I've been able to do a lot on our city council. I'm proud to say that I've passed more ordinances than any other council member and more initiatives than any other council member. And I'm really proud of that. And it's by finding common ground. Another project that I'm really proud about is putting funding into creating an inclusive park in Lincoln. And so that is to, again, help folks that may not have the equal access to play in our city. When that came up, I remember getting story after story after story of parents that felt like when they go to a park, all their child could do was watch others play. Or they were scared to, or the parent might have been in a wheelchair, but they were afraid to go to a park because if their child was playing on the playground equipment and fell, they didn't feel like that they would be able to get to their child. And so I've been able to tackle a lot of issues in our city by proactively seeking people that are affected by these issues, by working with people of differing abilities, by working with people who have been harmed by policies, by working with business owners, and by seeking out working people like our most recent apprenticeship ordinance. I'm very proud of the work that I've done and the coalitions that we've been able to build to get it done. And I plan to bring that same strength, that same skill, and that same passion to the lawmaking process. The one last thing that I would like to mention is the past 3 years have been an unusual time for local elected officials, particularly through the pandemic. And being able to serve during a pandemic, during a heightened polarized time, and facing a recall really instilled into me how important it is to do the right thing and to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. And decisions might not always be popular with everyone, but you have to make the right decisions in order to serve your constituents. And so it's that dedication and that ethics that I will bring into the Nebraska legislature.
All right, well, thank you. I guess that concludes our interview. We are grateful for your interest in running. We're grateful for your service, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see you later.